week 9 of the fantasy football season, and he has top 36 running backs. I'm ranking number 1 Alvin Kamara of the New Orleans Saints. Alvin Kamara, we know, suspended the first 3 games of the season, but ever since then, he's been a PPR machine, catching 6-7 balls per game. He's the engine that goes for this offense, and this week versus one of the worst defenses in the league, of the Chicago Bears. I got Kamara at 1, number 2, Austin Ekeler of the Los Angeles Chargers. It took a couple weeks for Ekeler to get his legs under him, and this week I know it's a tough matchup at the New York Jets here for Austin Ekeler, but I think Ekeler could get things going. We know he's one of the best receiving backs out of the backfield. This Jet team last week, I know Saquon Barkley still had a decent ball game. So Ekeler, PPR machine, like I said, a lot of short, intermediate routes. I think this Charger team's going to run in this one, try to tire out this Jet defense. And this is a big game for both teams on Monday Night Football. So I think Ekeler, after the big performance he had versus Chicago Bears, has another good game in this one versus the Jets. Number 3 staying in the same game, Breece Hall of the New York Jets. Breece Hall, we know he's got top 5 potential each and every week. And this week here with a great matchup versus the Chargers, a defense that really can't stop anyone. And Breece Hall has huge home run ability. We saw last week take a screen for 50 yards to the house for a touchdown. Once again, versus weak defense, getting 20-25 carries. Dalvin Cook hasn't been a factor the last 3-4 weeks in this backfield, and they got to rely on Hall to get points on the board. I got him at 3 for Saquon Barkley of the New York Giants. So what a workload it was for Barkley last week, 36 carries in that one. And we know DeVito, third-string quarterback, came into that game, and he just couldn't throw the football, so they were force-feeding Barkley till the end of that ball game where they lost in overtime. And this week here, good matchup at the Vegas Raiders. We just saw Jahmyr Gibbs shred him for over 150 yards on the ground in that game with a touchdown. So right now, Daniel Jones back in the lineup. That's going to help maybe a little bit. Raiders defense not great versus the run. And Barkley, we know, is a great talent, even on a bad team. At number 4, number 5, DeAndre Swift of the Philadelphia Eagles. So Swift, the last few weeks, the numbers have definitely dropped off. And teams, they've zeroed in on Swift. But Jalen Hurts has been doing all the damage, him and A.J. Brown, to opposing defenses. And this week here, Dallas Cowboys, we know they're good versus the pass. But it's one thing if it's a weakness on this defense. This is versus the run. So I think Swift, we're going to see a large dose of him in this one. Jalen Hurts, he's not 100% as well. Seen limping at the end of that game at the Commanders with a banged-up knee. And I got Swift at 5-6, Josh Jacobs of the Vegas Raiders. So Jacobs, he's pretty much been the only bright spot in this offense here for this Vegas Raider team. And this week, a great matchup versus the New York Giants that really can't stop anyone on the ground. We saw Breece Hall go for a big game versus Giant defense. We've seen running backs throughout the season have big games versus them. And like I said, I think they're going to have to run the football even more in this one as Vegas. This one, it's going to be a close, grinded-out game. I believe in Jacobs will do well in this one at 6. Number 7, Jonathan Taylor of the Indianapolis Colts. So last week, Taylor got off to a roaring start, and they just stopped giving him the ball in the second half. So this week here, a good matchup with the Carolina Panthers, a defense that really can't stop anyone. Jonathan Taylor, we know, is a top talent in this league, and with all the bye weeks and just running back being a weak position, even though Taylor isn't getting a full workload still, he's at 7. Number 8, Raheem Mostert of the Miami Dolphins. So Raheem Mostert, he definitely came back down to earth over the last few weeks here for this Dolphin team. He struggled versus the Philadelphia Eagles in Week 7's game, and then last week he did find the end zone, but only 10.5 fantasy points in PPR leagues it was versus the New England Patriots. So this week here, ball game in Germany, large crowd. It's going to be shootout potential versus them and the Chiefs. And I think Mostert in this one bounces back with a big game at 8. Number 9, Joe Mixon of the Cincinnati Bengals. So Joe Mixon last week, best game of the season with 20 fantasy points in PPR leagues. And all of a sudden, this Bengal team, a lot of people were counting them out at 1-3. Now 4-3, and if they could get a patented win here versus the Buffalo Bills, led by Joe Mixon with a good game in the backfield, I think they could do it here to improve to 5-3. So Joe Mixon, we know there's no one as a threat to him in the backfield. We know he's getting a full workload. Solid receiver out of the backfield as well. And this week here, I know not a great matchup versus Buffalo, but I got him in 9. Number 10, Derrick Henry of the Tennessee Titans. The Thursday Night Football, usually shootout type of games. Derrick Henry now, if Will Levis could keep continuing what he started in last week's game and move the ball down the field, it opens up the running lanes here for Derrick Henry. And that's what this team needs, a quarterback that could stretch the field, and Levis definitely showed it in last week's ball game versus the Atlanta Falcons. I think Henry here, Pittsburgh, he could find some open holes and make some plays. And like I said, if they don't stack the box with, Levis could throw that deep ball. I think he has a good game at 10. Number 11, Kenneth Walker of the Seattle Seahawks. So last week he got off to a monster start in that game. And another guy where he didn't get a lot of work, Zach Charbonnet did towards the end of that game. But anyway, tough matchup versus Baltimore. But Kenneth Walker has home run ability. He's still going to get a good and healthy workload. Even if Charbonnet is going to get 20-30% of the carries here, Kenneth Walker, like I said, still could have a good game. And I think in this one, we're going to see a lot of running by the Seattle Seahawks team. Number 12, Bijan Robinson of the Atlanta Falcons. So Bijan Robinson, one of the most talented running backs to come out over the last few seasons in the NFL draft. But this season, we just haven't seen that huge 30-plus point fantasy game out of Bijan Robinson. Taylor Heinicke in this one, at least he could stretch the field and get the ball down the field with a deep ball and has a better run than Desmond Ridder. And this week, it's a good matchup versus the Minnesota Vikings, where their defense is probably going to be on the field more than ever now with Kirk Cousins out for the season and Jaron Hall being the starter. So right now, Bijan Robinson has home run ability. He's had a few decent games this season, but this week versus Minnesota, I think in the back home for this Atlanta Falcon team, he has a good game. 13, Isaiah Pacheco of the Kansas City Chiefs. So Pacheco, he's been one of the better Chief running backs since the Kareem Hunt days. He's getting a good workload. He's runs over players, and he gives it all each and every carry. So right now in an offense where teams obviously are focusing on trying to stop Mahomes, it's opened things up here for Pacheco. And this week here versus the middle of the pack, Miami defense front line, I think Pacheco has a good game in this one at 13. 14, Ramondre Stevenson of the New England Patriots. Ramondre Stevenson, it's been an up and down season here for him, but now with Kendrick Bourne out for the season, I think we're going to see Stevenson lined up at times more as a receiver as well. So right now we know he's one of the better pass catching backs out of the backfield. And now we're Bourne out of the offense. They got to find more ways to get Stevenson involved. And this week it's a good opportunity versus the middle of the pack commander defense. And in a game we know that the Patriots need, so Stevenson 14, 15, James Cook of the Buffalo Bills. So James Cook, we know he's a talented running back, can catch the ball out of the backfield, make plays. I know Leonard Fournette signed with this Bill team, but he's only going to be a player for short yardage work. And yes, he'll take goal line work, obviously, from James Cook. But anyway, Josh Allen, for the most part, was doing that anyway. So this weekend, a potential shootout, and James Cook, every other game, it seems like he has a big game. This week, he would be in line with the way things are gone for the big game. At 15, 16, Rachaad White of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers season, his rookie year, 50 catches. And this year, there's been a lot of bad games and a couple good games in there here for White. But last week, they were finding a formula, him out of the backfield, catching a lot of dig routes and seam routes for 5-6 yards, and then yards after catch. So this week here versus a young Houston Texan defense, and inside on a fast track, I think Rachaad White, once again, is a solid number 2 running back in PPR leagues. 17, Tony Pollard of the Dallas Cowboys. So Pollard, he's falling down the ranking board week after week. The first 4 weeks of the season, he was putting up big numbers. In the last 3-4 weeks here, the numbers have gone down, except that one game at the Los Angeles Chargers in week 6. But that was more of one big play making his day. So Tony Pollard, tough matchup at Philly, one of the best front lines in all pro football. And like I said, this Cowboy team's been a pass-first team once again after going into the season. They were going to be a run-first team, but Dak Prescott's getting confidence. He's made a lot of plays the last 2 games. And this week here, Philly, if you want to beat them, I think the Cowboys are going to put the ball in Dak's hands, and we're going to see a lot of throwing again. 18, Gus Edwards of the Baltimore Ravens. So Gus Edwards, what a 3-touchdown performance it was for him at the Arizona Cardinals, even getting goal line work, where usually that's Lamar Jackson territory. But this week here, tougher matchup, obviously, versus Seattle Seahawks. Gus Edwards, I said, is a sell-high candidate, but he's a solid number 2 running back right now, getting work, 12, 15 touches per game, even making plays the last 2 weeks in the receiving game, where we saw 2 weeks ago versus the Lions in week 7. He had an 80-yard catch. So right now, Gus Edwards, he's just been a solid number 2 option and filling in well for J.K. Dobbins, who's obviously out for the season. 19, Aaron Jones of the Green Bay Packers. So Jones, he hasn't been the same this season, dealing with a hamstring injury on and off. And this week here, I know it's a mediocre matchup versus the Rams coming to town here in week 9. So Aaron Jones, we know he's a good pass catching back out of the backfield. But this season, this offense hasn't been sync, especially the last 3 weeks. Jordan Love hasn't been going out there making plays. Defenses have zeroed in and figured out his tendencies, and they've stopped the run game a lot as well of defenses. And even A.J. Dillon, for the most part, it's been a 50-50 split since Jones has come back. But I think Aaron Jones is due. And this week is a number 2 running back for fantasy owners. I think he's a decent option. 20, Kareem Hunt. Cleveland Browns. So Kareem Hunt last week had the big workload for the Brown team. I know Jerome Ford wasn't 100%, but surprisingly, he gutted it out and played that game with Jerome Ford. And Pierre Strong got work as well, but Kareem Hunt, we know he's the veteran running back. We know he knows the playbook, being there for 2 seasons before coming back in week 4 after Nick Chubb went out with injury. So Kareem Hunt in a good matchup versus Arizona, I think is going to lead the backfield in touches and could make plays. And I got him at 20-21, Darrell Henderson of Los Angeles Rams. So Henderson's been the man now since Kyren Williams has went out. And we know he's not that great of a running back. They cut him loose last season and he went to the Jaguars. But Henderson's going out there, he's making plays. First 2 games since he started, 13 and 11 fantasy points. And this week he had a decent matchup at Green Bay, where they're not great against the run, giving up the 3rd most fantasy points to running backs on the season. So right now, especially if Matthew Stafford's out in this game, they're heavily going to rely on the run, I believe, is this Los Angeles Ram team. 22, Brian Robinson of the Washington Commanders. So Robinson's pretty much been a touchdown dependable running back over the last few weeks, and he's still getting the carries, he's still getting the goal line touches and stuff, but we know he's not really a receiver out of the backfield. That's Antonio Gibson's role. But anyway, here in a pretty tougher matchup in New England, I know their defense hasn't been all that great, but they've stopped the run a decent amount this season as well. So right now, Robinson is a touchdown dependable back, even though he's still getting a healthy workload at 22. 23, Zach Moss, the Indianapolis Colts. So Zach Moss, a lot of people thought he was going to go away in terms of not getting touches and playing much and more of a change of pace back, but he's been in the mix a lot, even with Jonathan Taylor. 3-year, $42 million deal at week 4. So right now, Zach Moss, we know he's a good running back. He's running in between the tackles. He's top 10 in fantasy points at the position. And this week here at the Carolina Panthers, not a great defense at all. I think Zach Moss, even if he gets limited 10, 15 touches, could have a good game once again at the Panthers. And I got him at 23-24, Jerome Ford of the Cleveland Browns. So like I said earlier in the video, Ford, it was surprising he played in last week's game with the Seahawks, and he looked halfway decent for a guy who had a bum ankle. So this week a better matchup versus Arizona, but we just don't know the pecking order, if it's going to be Kareem Hunt getting the majority of the touches or Jerome Ford in this one. But this week with a good matchup, and pretty much it's been a 50-50 split for the most part, even though Jerome Ford's more explosive back than Hunt. I got him at 24-25, Deonta Foreman of the Chicago Bears. So Deonta Foreman, it's been 1 great game and 2 mediocre games for him since he stepped in for Khalil Herbert, who's been out with the ankle injury. So Foreman last season, we saw the same with him. It just all depends on game script. If it's a close game, he's going to get work. And then last week, like we saw at the Chargers, it wasn't a close game, and he only finished with 4.5 fantasy points. So this week here, I think it could be a close game early in New Orleans, and their defense is middle of the pack, but it's indoors, fast turf once again. So Foreman as the number 2 option, especially with 4 teams on bye. I got him at 25-26, Najee Harris of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And Najee Harris, the last 2 games have been the best games of the season for him. 15 fantasy points in week 7 for Harris. And then last week he had 10.5 fantasy points in a tough loss versus the Jaguars. So this week here, it's a tough matchup versus the Titans that are very stout versus the run, but you could pass on this Titan defense. A Thursday Night Football, Kenny Pickett's trying to play in this one. It's obviously going to be him or Mitchell Trubisky, but Najee Harris, like I said, his ceiling is 10-12 fantasy points. As a number 2 option, flex guy, not horrible, but he really hasn't shown burst and played well this season. 27, Alexander Mattison of the Minnesota Vikings. Alexander Mattison, he's been an up-and-down running back this season, but now with Kirk Cousins out for the season, I know Joshua Dobbs got traded over here to Minnesota. I think Madison, the workload's going to go up more. They're going to run the football a little bit more as this Minnesota Viking team, because we don't know what Jaron Hall's going to be. And Joshua Dobbs, he's been an up-and-down quarterback as well, when he's not on the Kirk Cousins level remotely close at all. So right now, tougher matchup at Atlanta as well, gives up the second least amount of fantasy points to backs on the season. And right now I got him at 27-28, Jaylen Warren of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So it looked like Warren, he was going to take over. 70-30 split over there in Pittsburgh. But right now, Najee Harris, like I said, the last 2 weeks, he's been playing better football. But Warren's still the more explosive back to me. Better receiver out of the backfield as well. And this week, it is a tougher matchup versus Tennessee. Like I said, that gives up not a lot of yards on the ground. Then you could beat them through the air. So this week here, I think once again they're going to try to sell out on the run as Tennessee and have Pickett or Trubisky, whoever starts in this game, try to beat him. Number 29, Chuba Hubbard of the Carolina Panthers. So Hubbard last week got the start. Miles Sanders didn't do anything and got the goose egg. And Hubbard, he didn't take advantage of his opportunity as well. But this week, a little better of a matchup versus the Indianapolis Colts. But this offense, they're going to have to start spreading teams out a little bit. Hubbard, we know, is a decent receiver out of the backfield. And I think this week, as a flex option, you could do worse. I got him at 29-30. Amari DiMercito of the Arizona Cardinals. So DiMercito, he's been the man now over there for the Cardinals the last 2 weeks. And this week, I know it's a tougher matchup at the Browns, where they got Myles Garrett and Dezarius Smith as the frontline stoppers over there. But DiMercito could catch out of the backfield. They're going for Clayton Tune or Kyler Murray in this game, where if it's Clayton Tune, they're going to have to rely on the run even more, and a lot of dump offs, I imagine, as well, to DiMercito. So this week here, tricky situation. He's a tough start, but he's still a starting running back in the league. I got him at 30-31, Dameon Pierce of the Houston Texans. So Dameon Pierce coming into the season, I thought he could take the next step, but obviously that hasn't been the case here with Dameon Pierce. And he's pretty much a guy getting 10-12 touches per game. Devin Singletary the last 3 weeks has really eaten into Pierce's workload. And he can't finish as well at the goal line. Many times this season, he's been at the goal line and not finishing. We saw it once again last week, and last week only finishing 12 carries, 46 yards. So this week here versus a pretty stout defense of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in terms of stopping the run, I don't have much faith in Dameon Pierce. He's 31-32, Roschon Johnson of the Chicago Bears. So Johnson returned in last week's game at the Chargers after having a concussion. And this week here, not a great matchup with the Saints. Johnson more the third down back, or if they're trailing in the game, he's going to be in there a lot like we saw last week. But last week really didn't do much. Is Johnson had a pedestrian game, but this week maybe things could change up. And he's 32-33, Antonio Gibson of the Washington Commanders. So pretty much Gibson, he don't get many carries anymore, but he's still a decent running back receiver out of the backfield. He can line up in the slot if he really needed to. I'm a former wide receiver in college, and right now this week here at the New England Patriots, I think we could see Gibson have a sneaky type of ball game. So right now, I know Brian Robinson's the back over there, but his production really hasn't been all that great as well. So Gibson could sneak in this one, and I got him at 33-34. Devin Singletary of the Houston Texans. A Singletary week after week now, the last 3-4 weeks, is eating into the workload of Dameon Pierce. And last week, in terms of touches, it was a 50-50 split with Pierce and Singletary. So Singletary, who knows, a better receiver out of the backfield than Pierce. We know he's got more experience playing many seasons with the Buffalo Bills in between the tackles. And it looks like this Texan coaching staff likes him, and they're giving him the opportunity. So this week, I have him at 34-35, Tyjae Spears of the Tennessee Titans. So Tyjae Spears, his value definitely could go up a little bit now with Will Levis in there, where he could stretch the field. He can make the throws, and even on dump-offs, designed screens to Spears we've seen this season, where he's an explosive type of receiving back. So this year, it's been surprisingly more of a workload than I expected. Derrick Henry's usually 90% guy in the workload over there, but this season it's been more like 70-30 in Henry's favor. And there's even been games this season where Spears has outsnapped Derrick Henry because of trailing and obviously being a passing downs back. So this week here, Pittsburgh, if they're going to want to find some ways to make plays in this game and have Will Levis be comfortable, I think Spears could be decent. And the 36th and final running back I'm ranking this week's A.J. Dillon of the Green Bay Packers. So Dillon, it's been an up and down season once again. I know him and Aaron Jones has pretty much been a 50-50 split, but it seems like when A.J. Dillon gets a full opportunity, he really hasn't taken advantage of it and had a big game. So right now, he's a middle-of-the-pack type of running back, a guy where his ceiling's 10, 12 fantasy points at most is A.J. Dillon. And I don't think he offers much for fantasy owners, but obviously with buys and injuries, as a number 2 running back flex option, he's possibly serviceable this week in a decent matchup versus the Rams. So that's the top 36 running backs I'm ranking for Week 9 of the fantasy football season.